As you know, top minds around the world are making artificial intelligence smarter, easier to use, and more intuitive at a dizzying pace. And hopefully, it's going to make all of our lives a bit better. But what about your brain health? What are you doing to become your best and brightest storytelling self? Welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and I'm delighted to have on today's show Dr. Greg Wells, author of the new book, Powerhouse: Elevate Your Energy, Optimize Your Health, and Supercharge Your Performance. I recently heard his approach to maintaining brain health at the Ascensus Conference in Austin, Texas, where we were both keynote speakers. I was so impressed with how he translated complex neuroscience into practical strategies for peak performance that I invited him to share his brilliance with you. Luckily for all of us, he happily agreed. He is the founder of Wells Performance, who helps teams, schools, and businesses become places where people reach peak performance through optimal health and well-being. Okay, I'll admit it. I was a bit spooked when AI came online. I even said that I thought AI would compound mediocrity at the rate of Moore's Law. My fear was that interesting, emotional storytelling would go the way of the bison as sterile, robotic messaging drowns out us humans. I suppose we're already seeing a glimpse of that in the dearth of inane digital marketing and social posts that obviously rely solely on bots blathering bloated boasts. Say that 5 times fast. But I was wrong about AI. I've learned how effective it can be to free us up from having to create those first drafts by replacing that blank page with actual thought-provoking inspiration that we can then spend our time and energy on, making it uniquely our own communication, our own stories, by bringing our irreplaceable human touch needed to connect with our audiences, something I don't think AI will ever be able to do. And I've experienced just that with our Story Cycle Genie, where we bottled my 20-plus years applying the Story Cycle system that has helped brands grow by as much as 600% into an AI agent we call the Story Cycle Genie. Here's what Melissa Fisher had to say about using our Story Cycle Genie. She is the People Operations Manager at Green Irony, a Tampa-based Salesforce and Agentforce AI implementer. She even affectionately called it their Park Bot.
I just wanted to let you know that I am loving the Story Cycle Genie so far. I have been calling it the Park Bot internally. Hope you don't mind. It's helped me write 2 social media posts, an email for the folks that responded to our No BS campaign, and a one-pager, and I've had access to it for 2 whole days. It has been really easy to work with, going back and forth, tweaking words, changing the tone, all of those kind of little nitpicky things that we go through when we're writing out copy for marketing and web pages and all that good stuff. It really is like having direct access to your brain. And you should know that I read the responses in your voice. Thanks.
My heart is warm that she's using our AI Story Cycle Genie, but she's connecting it to me. When she said she could hear my voice in it, she's like connecting to my brain. So it's a nice little synthesis, I guess, of the AI world and humanity, don't you think? And our whole goal is to help people like Melissa, people like you, to replace months of brand story strategy creation with minutes so that you can focus on the most important part of storytelling, your human touch. So as we free you from the exhaustive tedium of defining and refining your brand story, as you no longer have to worry over your first draft, conserving your precious energy to make it amazing, as you replace mind-numbing minutia with immediate momentum, applying your gray matter to colorful storytelling, remember that AI and you work best together with a healthy brain, your healthy brain, sharpening the focus of your real intelligence to be your best and brightest storytelling self.
So really, our heart, lungs, and brain have the exact same mathematical patterns that exist in nature. So it's possible that when we immerse ourselves in nature and the visual field is open to these fractal patterns, that maybe there's some sort of processing that's happening inside the brain that enables us to relax, calm down, and chill out to such an extent that we're get ourselves out of this highly activated state that so many of us are in right now, especially if you look at the news. Please don't do that. And down into a state where you can actually create something that's going to make the world a better place.
Greg Wells is more than a scientist, human physiologist, and best-selling author. He is an elite swimmer and endurance athlete completing unimaginable events like the Nanizavik Marathon, 600 miles north of the Arctic Circle, Ironman Canada, and the Tour de Africa, an 11,000 kilometer cycling race, the longest in the world. Pretty freaking amazing. Dr. Wells earned a PhD in human physiology, was a tenured professor at the University of Toronto, and is now a senior scientist at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. He has written 5 best-selling books and hosted the award-winning Super Bodies series, which aired on Olympic broadcasts worldwide in 2010 and 2012. Today, we'll discuss easy things you can do right now to create and maintain the healthiest brain imaginable. Hi, Greg. Welcome to the show.
Park, it is so good to be here. I'm thrilled we got to meet in Austin and psyched we can connect again virtually.
Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago out at the Ascensus conference, and I was doing a storytelling keynote there, but I had the great pleasure of listening to your presentation in advance of that, all, talking about health in your book, Powerhouse, and I believe you've done a few different presentations with Ascensus, is what I gather.
Yeah, that was the second set that I've done for them, and it was just great to go a little bit deeper into physiology. And I love the fact that so many people are interested right now in getting healthy and performing well at the same time, like not sacrificing your health to get success, but actually trying to do it concurrently. So it was fun.
Well, and your talk was very timely for me. I'll be 64 on Valentine's Day, and I'm still, people are saying, are you retiring anytime soon? I go, no, man, I love what I do. But, as we age, I've noticed that I was starting to forget some names and maybe wasn't quite as sharp as I was in the past. And my wife is very, very much into holistic medicines and so forth. And I've been drinking bullet coffee and MCT oil and taking creatine and all that. And I've noticed a dramatic change, actually. Boy, my brain just feels younger and fresher and sharper. And so I wanted to bring your message and your story and your background to our listeners on the importance of brain health. How do you find it? How do you maintain it so that they can be their very best creative storytelling selves? So where do we begin?
Well, honestly, everyone's looking for a hack. Everyone's looking for a shortcut. Everyone's looking for some magic pill. And the reality is that it's a lot to do with just doing the basics really, really well, really consistently. And that's not going to get me a lot of likes on Instagram to say that. And, my follower count's not going to suddenly shoot up because it is the most opposite from anything controversial. But the reality is that we know that very specific things improve the body. Your brain is part of your body. They are not separate. The mind and body are one and the same. And while the mind is an extension of the brain, but the brain and body are one and the same. And we know that when we go for walks, that you're physically better and you're going to be mentally better. When you do anything that produces lactic acid, like going up a flight of stairs or doing a spin class or something like that, there's a molecule that gets produced that causes you to produce more BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates the growth of new neurons inside the brain. We know that meditation is good for the brain. Nature is good for the brain. That healthy foods like eating the rainbow is amazing for the brain. So honestly, it's just about crafting that ultimate healthy lifestyle. And the more of that you do, the better you get body, brain, and the longer that we can live in an awesome way. So, obviously we're going to have there's the risk of a genetic problem that's going to catch up to us at some point, and that it is what it is. But so much of this is modifiable and actually really fun. It just makes life better, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do all of that, I would say. Probably not to the levels that you would want me to, but again, Michelle cooks very well. We eat very well. She doesn't let me eat a lot of crap. Thanks for that. I like to take our dog Hazel, our golden doodle, on 5-milers up through the forest, up to Crystal Point and back. It's a good enough hike that it definitely gets my heart up and running, but it's not a killer hike like I used to do as a younger man. But yeah, being out there doing that forest bathing and all that stuff is great. But you, I think, have some even more specifics that we could talk about. And before we get to that, you and yourself, you are an amazing storyteller. Would you mind sharing your backstory with our listeners on how have you gotten to where you are today?
I know it's really wild that I'm so happy to be talking about creativity. And if you had said, Greg, 5 years ago, Greg, you're going to be talking about creativity and brain function, I would have been like, what? So taking it all the way back, I was a competitive swimmer growing up. When I was 15, I was training in Florida and had an accident in the ocean, body surfing, broke my neck in a number of places.
Oh my God, what happened? Take us to that. What?
It was just like we were out playing in the waves, and a big wave picked me and my buddy up and dropped us, sort of head first, shoulder first into the beach. He dislocated his shoulder, and I landed right on the top of my head and exploded a few vertebrae in my neck. So dislocated, shattered one of them. I think it was broken in like 6 or 7 places. The X-ray was and still is frightening. I have it. And then managed to go through 3 months of traction where they put bolts in your head, which is, if you're watching on video, I've got these marks on my forehead. It was in the Halo vest for a while. And then on my 16th birthday, they did neurosurgery to rebuild my spine, and then went through months and months of rehab. Ultimately, I was able to get back to swimming again, swam all the way through college, didn't make the Olympics. All my friends made the Olympics. I didn't. But I got to go with television, so I was even better. I had a better time than they did, I think. But that led and sparked my interest in the human body. And so I did a degree in kinesiology and a master's in exercise science, and then a PhD in respiratory physiology, and then a postdoc in respiratory medicine, then another postdoc in biomedical engineering. So I was like a long time in graduate work. Ultimately, I was a physiologist for the Olympic team for almost 20 years and did some military applications as well, and then built a research practice at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, working in cystic fibrosis and leukemia. All through that, I wrote 5 books, and that's sparked the speaking career, which is what led to you and I hanging out in Texas last week. So a long journey from Florida all the way through Canada out to Texas, but that's the journey.
I remember in your presentation, you had your very first slide, I think it was, where it was a very tight close-up of rowers, and I think they were in an Olympic trial or maybe an actual Olympic event. The guy in the lead looked just so casual. He wasn't gripping the oar hard. His face looked like he wasn't exerting any effort. And then the guy just outside of him, behind him, was tense. Face was grimacing. You could see his knuckles on the oar there. And you made that point of, look at the leader here is completely chill while putting his body through remarkable endurance. The guy, losing is all tense, stressed up. And I think a lot of that kind of goes in the creative mind as well, doesn't it?
It's so interesting because that image was so cool. We were at a training camp right before the Olympics, and the closer that you get to an Olympic Games, the less hard work you do. I think a lot of people think that you train harder right before the Olympics. You don't. You want no fatigue, no injuries, no aches and pains, no stress, so that you arrive fresh and energized. And so in this really, really hard session right before the games, the number 1 and number 2 people in the world were training together. And I wrote a really hard workout, and they went out and did it. And I snapped some photos. And the image is one where they're going the exact same speed. Everything is the same time of day, same point in the training cycle. They've both broken the world record. So they're equivalent level athletes. But Adam Van Koeverden, who is, the one in yellow in the image, his face is so calm. Like his tongue is hanging out the side of his mouth. And when you look at his hands, he's only holding onto the paddle with 3 fingers. Like he's so relaxed. It's almost like you could tap the paddle and it would go flying. Whereas Anders Gustafsson from Sweden was next to him in black, and he's holding and gripping the paddle for dear life. And you can see the jaw muscle totally clenched as he tries to keep up. And so they're doing the exact same thing in 2 completely different ways. Adam's going fast, relaxed, energized, and Anders is going hard, tense, nervous, stressed. This is a state that predicts performance in everything, not just sports. If you think about sports, it's obvious. If someone's tense on the free throw line in a basketball game, you know they're missing. But if they're calm, relaxed, and fluid, the shot goes in. Public speaking, you've seen nervous speakers, it does not go well. Relaxed speakers tend to do a really great job. And in storytelling and creativity, it's even more important because tension blocks creativity inside the brain. And relaxation is what opens up the possibility for creativity. And imagine if you have to tell or come up with a new story, right? Like you have to find a story. You're not going to find it through, I have to come up with a story right now. You're going to go for a walk. You're going to chill. Your mind is going to wander. And all of a sudden, you're going to get this really interesting little idea. And you're like, that's a cool concept. I wonder if I could break that out, right? Writing a piece of music would be the same, right? Like the Beatles described how they came up with some of the ideas for their songs. And it started with just like a word or two, which then emerged and blossomed into this beautiful piece of music. So yeah, the more relaxed we are, the more creative that we can be and the higher performance we can achieve across pretty much every single discipline.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned music. I got a degree in music composition and theory and wrote lots of songs as a kid and then got into the whole academia behind, Bach and Mozart and all that stuff. And I can tell you of all the songs that I've written and some of the composers and songwriters that I talked to, Ben Folds I'm a big Ben Folds fan and had an opportunity to ask him a question about that too. He said, how long does it take you to write a song? And he goes, my best songs just come out of me. I might be working at the piano, I might be doing some things and whatever, but I end up not having to actually work on a song. And I found, of course, I'm not at Ben Folds' level, but all the music that I wrote that I really like, typically I could write in one sitting. I wasn't even thinking about it. It just was happening. And then I've got songs that I had to really work over, and they just aren't that good. At least I don't like them that much. My wife thinks they should be everywhere in the world, but to me, I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a chance to hang out with Tim Reynolds, who's a country music singer-songwriter, and he wrote Live Like You Were Dying for, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the actual artist's name, but anyway, it's a big, huge country music song. And I was talking to him about creativity, and it was really interesting. He says, we write every day. We create every single day. He goes to the studio every single day because that is what he does. That's where he goes. But he mentioned exactly like you. Sometimes something just pops into your brain and you've got it. And because he's always there, he's ready to capture it. Doesn't mean that he's creative every single day. There's a process around it. Like writers write, musicians play music, athletes train. Like we do what we do. But every once in a while, against the backdrop of that, when you drop into the right state, which is actually in the brain called a theta brainwave state, that's when you can put two and two together. That's where you're in such a state where the brain can link different regions of the brain together to quote unquote put two and two together. Super interesting how the language reflects what's actually happening inside the brain. And it's those little magic moments that create those sparks of inspiration where you can see things differently. You can solve a problem. You can see the solution or come up with a very cool, neat little idea that leads to the piece of writing or the piece of music or the piece of art. So it's pretty cool, pretty amazing when that happens.
So what can we do? Like, what's the number one thing any of us can do? We're not Olympic athletes. We're not big-time selling musicians. We're just folks that want to be able to share our story in a meaningful way and connect with people. What's one of the first things we can do to get in the right mindset?
Slow down to speed up. If we want to get into the right mindset to be creative, to tell stories, to come up with new solutions to old problems, share our ideas with the world, we often put so much pressure on ourselves that it's all about doing more. Yet the reality is that it's actually about doing a whole lot less. I say that as someone who's struggling with that right now because there's such a necessity to put out short form content on social. And I know that that drives my business. But I also deep down know that it's time to let that go and go into long form, deeper explorations of ideas, because that's where I know my creativity lies. And that's where I know where I can actually make a difference. So this is not an easy thing for all of us to do. I'm struggling with it myself. But the idea of slowing down in order to speed up has a scientific rationale and basis for that. When we're in hustle, focus, execute mode, get stuff done, brainwaves emerge, and brainwaves are to put electrodes all over your head and measure the electricity that's pumping through your brain. You can actually measure it, and they come in waves, and you can measure how fast they're going. And when you're in beta brainwave mode, hustle, focus, execute, get stuff done, they're 16 to 30 hertz or cycles per second. They're pretty fast. When we slow down a little bit, actually about 50%, you enter an alpha brainwave state. That's when you can learn, reflect, plan, strategize. Also super important. Slow down even further, 50% again, sort of in that 6 to 10 zone, maybe 6 to like 14, somewhere in there, hertz cycles per second. That's the theta brainwave state. You're almost asleep. You're that calm. The mind is just wandering. You're ideating. Your mind is drifting. That's the state where you can be creative. That's where a new solution is going to pop into your brain. That's where the eureka moments lie. And so in order for us to be creative, in order for us to find the story or see things in a different way, you've got to really chill out. You've got to really calm down. And the opposite is what we think we need to do. Think we need to do more. We need to do faster. It's actually do less. That's where the magic lies. It's hard to give yourself permission to do that, but when you do, oh my gosh, really cool things happen.
Do you try to carve out a certain amount of every day just to chill, to get away from the computer to do that?
I don't necessarily do it every day. So, for example, Monday this week, I went through about 12 hours of admin. It's just like rapid fire, micro things all day long, just clearing the deck of all of that. But Wednesday this week, I filmed content and I made sure that there was absolutely nothing else for me to do that day. And I took my sweet time. I produced some pretty cool stuff that day, but there was nothing else on my schedule other than that. But what I really notice about creativity, about the new ideas, is that they tend to happen for me when I'm doing some form of long, slow distance type exercise. LSD is what we call it. It's long, slow distance, not the drug, the actual exercise, right? And so when I go for a long walk without my technology, I notice that after a while, my mind starts to wander. And that's where I come up with really cool ideas. I'm also a swimmer. I still love swimming. I swim a few times a week. And earlier this week in the master's practice that I was in, there was a long set. It was about 2 miles. It took about 40 minutes or so. And it was just like a long rhythmical pattern of freestyle front crawl swimming for 40 minutes. And in that time, my mind was wandering. I was like, oh yeah, no, I see what I need to do over in that space. So we also know that rhythmical, repetitive patterns physically help to drop you down into that theta brainwave state. That could be walk, run, jog, swim, bike, paddle, any sort of rhythmic, repetitive activity. But it also happens around water. There's a reason why in certain Buddhist traditions, when you're doing meditation, it helps to do it next to a waterfall. It enables the mind to just settle down into that rhythmic, repetitive theta brainwave state where you can begin to see and become the observer of your thoughts rather than being embedded in your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. So that's sort of where I'm practicing doing it, is that long, slow distance, but also then carving out specific times when I can really do the creative work that I feel like I need to be doing. I also am beginning the process of writing the next book. And so there will be a lot more of that probably in the summer coming up.
I do the exact same thing when I go on that 5-miler with Hazel. Sometimes I don't want to do it. I'm tired or whatever. I feel like I'm too backed up on different projects and whatever. But I get out there and walk, and you're right. Yeah, so it takes me about a third of the way to get into it, to get my body going, and my brain's still firing on what's going on back at the office. And then by the time I get up to Crystal Point, I've got a little bit of a sweat going. I'm kind of chilling, and it's on my way down that all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a solution to that problem. Where did that come from? And, it's that whole idea, too, of forest bathing, as they call it, which I think is kind of a funny term, but it really seems to work. There's a different energy out there.
There was this really interesting moment during the pandemic, which I promise I won't mention ever again, where, we were away and I ended up renting a cabin in the woods to get out of the city. And my kids were in virtual school and away from their friends, and their activities were canceled, and nobody was happy, even though we were in a pretty magical place. It was just a stressful time. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was really not in a good place. She was 10 or 11 years old, and she's like, psychologically, it was in a dark place, as many of us were. And I managed to get her outside, and we went to the local park, and I took a picture of her when we first arrived there, and she was down, like the shoulders slumped, head down. Body language just screamed depression, right? Even at 10 or 11 years old. And we managed to keep moving through the environment and walking through the trees. And about 10 minutes later, she suddenly started to come back to life, started to straighten up, little creeping smile, eyes opened up, curiosity returned. And all of a sudden, she's this creative, happy kid again. And I was fascinated because I didn't really do anything. I didn't talk to her about anything other than just simply we were moving through the environment. I didn't do anything. And began to explore the effect of nature on the brain. As I do, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist. I go to the literature, I try to find out what does the research show. And what the research shows is that when we practice Shinrin Yoku, as it's known in Japan, or forest bathing, as we often call it here, there is a profound impact upon our mental health. Specifically, being in a natural environment helps us to get out of beta brainwave mode, hustle, focus, execute, get stuff done, stress, nervous, tense, anxious, down into an alpha brainwave state, which is sort of that 50% of it, our way to creativity, theta. And in the alpha brainwave state, that's when you can learn, that's when you can plan, that's when you can strategize, that's when you can reflect, which is why going to sit on a park bench without your technology with a journal is a great thing to do if you need to figure out what's going on, right? That's a magical place for you to go. And so seeing Ingrid move from that stress, tense, nervous, anxious state down into the creative, curious, happy, relaxed state just by embedding herself in that natural environment was really, really cool. So I actually encourage everyone to do that as often as you can. But actually, the research shows you only need to do it once a week, because if you do it once a week, you increase the immune cells that fight off colds, flus, and other respiratory tract infections. They're called you inhale phytoncides, they up-level your natural T killer cells, a bunch of technical terms you don't need to know. But ultimately, what we've learned is that even once a week for about an hour, you get most of these benefits, and they last for days afterwards. So get out there, go for a walk. If you have access to a park, fantastic. Mountains, even better. And funny enough, water is an amplifier. So if you can do any of this around a river, a lake, or the ocean, it's that much better for you.
Well, thank goodness we live on Lake Odell right here. It's not a
There you
big
go.
lake, but there's water out there. So why does that work? In all of your research, were you able to find why nature and, forest bathing actually is good for us Homo sapiens?
Well, physically, what we think is happening is that the plants will release molecules out into the air to defend themselves. We inhale those molecules. They go into our lungs, they go into our blood, and those little molecules spark our immune system to fight off all of those invaders. It's sort of like a little reminder to the immune system that, hey, you know what? There's some stuff out here. You got to be careful. And that increases the activity of your white blood cells, which fight off colds, flus, so viruses, bacteria, fungus, broken down cells, all of those other factors. So it appears to amplify the effectiveness of our immune system, actually so much so that it has been shown to have a measurable effect upon cancer cells. It's that powerful. So we think physically it probably has to do with up-leveling your immune system. Just to show you how powerful our immune system actually is, when we pass away, let's say you die and you are, laid out in a forest, your body will dissolve in a matter of days. That's how powerful our immune system is. Like, we're constantly fighting off fungus, bacteria, viruses that literally would dissolve you in a matter of days if your immune system wasn't that strong, right? So when we interact with our environment, it strengthens our immune system to keep us healthy. From a psychological perspective, it's really interesting. One of the research papers I read suggests that it's possibly because in our visual field, what we see, there's something called a fractal pattern in nature. So fractal patterns are repeating mathematical patterns that decrease in size. So imagine that you have like a fern, if you can imagine a fern plant, which has the big leaves at the stem, and they slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller out towards the tip of the tree. But it's exactly the same pattern. The leaves all look the same. They just get smaller and smaller and smaller as they go out.
The snowflake is a good example of a fractal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Snowflake is another perfect example of like a pattern that decreases as it moves from the center all the way out to the outside in a repeating mathematical pattern. So those fractal patterns are present in 92% of plants, but they're also present in the airways of our lungs, in the capillary beds or blood vessels of our heart, and the neurons or the cells of our brain. So really, our heart, lungs, and brain have the exact same mathematical patterns that exist in nature. So it's possible that when we immerse ourselves in nature and the visual field is open to these fractal patterns, that maybe there's some sort of processing that's happening inside the brain that enables us to relax, calm down, and chill out to such an extent that we're get ourselves out of this highly activated state that
Mhm.
so many of us are in right now, especially if you look at the news. Please don't do that. And down into a state where you can actually create something that's going to make the world a better place.
Yeah. So let's keep on this track about the physical environments that we're in and what we can do with that. Now, I'm a big believer in meditation and in particular yoga nidra, which is that you lay down. I do a guided meditation through the Breathe app, which I absolutely love. It's 26 minutes long. It's the same guy every single time walking me through it. You picture these points of lights on your body firing up and going out into the universe. He cautions you, do not fall asleep. Try to stay awake. Sometimes I do fall asleep. But I do this almost every single day between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I don't always feel like completely rested when I come out of it. It's like, oh man, I'm still dragging. But I got to believe I'm still getting some benefits for my brain by doing that.
There's so much research that shows that mindfulness and meditation are powerful tools to help improve our mental health, our cognition, our attention, and our creativity and our overall health. It's amazing to think that the research is super clear that meditation lowers your risk of cardiovascular disease. Like, but it's just amazing that meditation can be used to decrease the risk of recurrence of breast cancer. Like, there's over and over and over again, we're seeing these incredible studies come out but they also show that meditation rewires the brain. It increases the density of myelin, which is the little fat that wraps around the branches of the neurons in your brain, just like bark on the branch of a tree, and protects them from damage to rewire the white matter tracts, the deep networks of the brain. And so I really recommend that people adopt some form of a meditation practice, which is simply that we want to bring our attention into the present moment for long enough that the mind starts wandering. You then notice that the mind is wandering and you bring it back to the anchor, which is either your breath or counting or a mantra or the waves slapping on the beach, like whatever the anchor happens to be. You just do that until your mind wanders, and then you bring it back. So you're just practicing being mindful, aware of your mind. What I have found the primary benefit of that to be is that I now can separate myself from my thoughts and emotions so I can become the observer, which is really important when you have kids. Because sometimes they're doing something that really pisses you off. And you're like, what is it that's making me upset? Because clearly it's not that Adam's playing with the ball in the kitchen. It's definitely something about me, right? And then you can sort of separate yourself out from that and say, okay, what's actually happening here? And then you can do an appropriate response rather than a reaction, which is what normally happens. So I'm a big fan of mindfulness, meditation, prayer, if that's in your belief system, journaling, creative writing, playing music, doing art, carpentry, cooking food, right? All of those practices can bring you into the present moment and give you that grounding so that you can settle your mind and just give your brain a break. I love the fact that you do it between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, because we've also seen that meditation essentially does the same things to the brain as sleep does. It helps to clear out adenosine, which is a fatigue factor that builds up in the brain as we go about our days. So it's a beautiful reset that probably prevents you from having your afternoon crash. So that's definitely a good time to do it. I like doing it in the morning. I like doing it when I'm in the sauna. I really find it helpful to do it when I'm in the cold water, because I jump in cold water quite often. There's all sorts of different times. And airplanes, love doing it on airplanes because they're miserable in general. So yeah, it's a great practice for everyone to build into their lives.
And you mentioned a sauna. We got a sun-lightened sauna in June this past year, and it's infrared, plus it has the heating coils in it. I grew up in Seattle. My dad was a crazy Norwegian, and we had the old-fashioned sauna up there. So we'd go skiing. We'd be out in the cold rain and whatever, and then we'd dive in that sauna and just loved it. It was, you pour the water on the hot rocks and you get the steam and all that. Well, this is the non-steam. It's infrared, which was, my wife really had to sell me on that technology. I was like, no, old school, let's get the old thing in here. But we love it. And we probably take 5 to 6 saunas a week, 30 minutes at, and it's also got the lights up in the ceiling. So you've got the red light therapy and the green light and all those, the literal rainbow of colors, depending on what you want it to do. What does saunas do for you? And what is your take on that?
So I love that you're bringing this up because it enables us to talk about a principle called hormesis, which is about how the body responds to stress. So all of us, our physiology likes to have everything stable and constant, which is called homeostasis. Everything is the same. What happens when we're stressed is that homeostasis gets disrupted. So for example, we like to be at rest, but when you go for a walk, homeostasis is disrupted and you breathe harder to try to bring your internal chemistry back into balance. Heat is exactly the same way. Our body likes to be at a certain temperature. When you expose your body to heat, that temperature goes up, and then the body works really hard to bring it back into homeostasis. In this case, it would be sweating. For example, if you do the opposite and you jump into the cold, it would be shivering to try to bring you back up to that level. So the body loves to be in a nice, stable level, but sauna, heat, or cold water immersion or cold showers, they both disrupt that temperature, and the body works to bring it back to balance. The research shows that a sauna has the same effects upon our body as a cardiovascular workout. So it's really, really good for your cardiovascular system. And we produce something called a heat shock protein, which stimulates the growth of new blood vessels, the capillaries, the microscopic blood vessels inside of the body and the brain. Research on people who do saunas consistently over a long period of time from Scandinavia shows that it might add anywhere from 3 to 7 years of life. Like that's how powerful of a tool this is in terms of preventing cardiovascular disease. So I try to practice a few times a week. We also have an infrared sauna. Really enjoy it. I think that there's a difference between infrared and the traditional heat type saunas. They're slightly different in their effects. They're both good. So whatever one you've got access to, ours is infrared because it's indoors. But the ultimate hack appears to be alternating heat with cold. So if you can get into the sauna to the point that you're sweating and then go outside into the snow or into a cold shower and do that back and forth a few times, that's like the ultimate. But we tell people a few times a week, 3 to 5 times a week, 10 to 20 minutes, basically stay in there until you're sweating. If you can do it a couple times around, that's fantastic. But that's the pattern that we do. And if you can do breath work in the sauna, that's amazing. Meditation in the sauna also. We've also got a red light therapy device inside the sauna as well. So sort of habit stacking can work, but it's a hugely powerful practice for you and definitely one of the things that we recommend.
Yeah. And the nice thing about it is that slow down part of your day because you're sitting in that sauna for 30 minutes and you're not on your phone. I actually pipe in music from my Breathe app. And, they say, that's a question I've got for you. They talk about some of the brain or the music, the sound waves is what I'm trying to say from this music. And it's composed in such a way that those sound waves are actually, embedding in you and healing you. Is that really a thing? Excuse me. Is that really a thing?
Well, I'm not sure if sound waves heal us. I do know that there's loads of research that shows that music improves our mental health. It can be used to improve our mood. There was a research study that I found a few years ago that looked at MRI of the brain as people were listening to music. There were 7 regions of the brain that increased their activity levels in response to music. Is the same 7 regions of the brain that appear to be down-regulated in depression. So we know that music can improve our mood, unless you're listening to a Taylor Swift breakup song, in which case it does the opposite. And anyway, we got a lot of Taylor Swift going on in my house these days, so 14-year-old daughter. But yeah, we know that music improves our mood and can be absolutely fantastic for us. So no question, that is something that we can leverage. There's a book by Daniel Levitin called Your Brain on Music, which is absolutely fascinating. And he gets into the impact of music on our brain as it develops, and how when we listen to music as teenagers, it actually rewires our brains that for the rest of your life, that's the music that you like. So I'm stuck with Zeppelin and The Who and The Police and Peter Gabriel, whereas my daughter's into Sabrina Carpenter and Taylor Swift and all those. And my son likes Eminem. I'm okay with that one. But anyway, so we're working our way through all of that. Music is a powerful tool, and I would love for everyone listening to think about creating a soundtrack for your life and crafting a beautiful playlist to listen to on your way to work to get psyched up, or a calming playlist to calm you down on the way home, a playlist to listen to during dinner with your family. And probably most importantly for this podcast, a playlist that you listen to when you're being creative. So when I write my books, I've written 5, which would shock my grade 8 teacher, English teacher. What I do is I will listen to a concert. So I'll find an artist that I love. If they've played a concert, I'll put that concert on. Typically will last 90 minutes to 2 hours. And because it's the same artist, same tone, same everything, I drop it into sort of a very, very calm state where that's in the background. And then I can do my work and it just sort of settles me down. I know a really good colleague of mine who's also an author will listen to a movie soundtrack. So she wrote one of her books to Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. I find that also concerts that are classical seem to really help me to concentrate and focus. The hack being is that it must be music and an artist that you're very familiar with. If it's new music or a new artist, it will capture and hold your attention. Where if you're familiar with it, it drops into the background and settles those brainwaves down so you can enter into those creative states.
My mom introduced me to Bach Brandenburg concertos when I was high school, maybe junior high, and studying music and that sort of thing. And I just always loved them, the math to it, and it's just beautiful. And quite often I'll use that and just throw it on. There's a lot of songs in there, a lot of pieces in the concertos, and just put it on the background. I've heard them all so many times. To your point, it just becomes almost like Muzak, but way better,
Way better.
Yeah, exactly.
Way better. Do you think they were aware of that math when they were composing, or do you think that it was just the flow of what they were creating?
I think he was. I think it's a combination thereof. Boy, a long time ago, I studied Bach and his history, but a very, very smart guy, and his sons were very smart. And so, no, they had a schooling in mathematics, and I think it became like a Sudoku puzzle. There's a Sudoku. I never know how to say that.
Yeah.
To them, it's like, here's this beautiful melody I have, and they've got all these rules, of course, and we had to compose music like Bach, and we had to follow every single rule. You can't approach a fifth in the same direction, or you can't approach an octave in any two voices in the same direction is just an example of that. Or if you're going for a resolution from a raised fourth, it's got to go in a particular direction. And so I think to them it was they would hear this melody that they loved, and then it became an absolute puzzle. How do I write all the counterpoint to that and make sure I don't break any of my own rules that are pretty much based on math, So I think,
That's so
think
curious.
they did know about it.
And then I'm flipping the podcast to interviewing you now. Do you think that those constraints, having to follow the rules, yet at the same helped or hindered their creativity?
Helped. Absolutely. I mean, with all the people you've ever worked with, from athletes to, creative people and whatever, they always work best under constraints, don't they?
Yeah, there's certain rules to a game that
Yeah.
you have to conform with. And within those rules, you can be unlimited. Your creativity can be unlimited. But if there
Yeah.
were infinite creativity with no guardrails, then what are you even doing?
Then you just end
So-
up with noise. You're just all
Yeah.
over the place. But
Isn't that an interesting idea?
music itself has its own constraints. I'm going to write in the key of C. All right. Now, if I want to go and modulate to the key of A minor, then I've got to do some particular chord movements, harmonies to get there so it still sounds right to a person versus just all of a sudden, wow, out of nowhere, I've got this new key signature, which is going to throw everybody off. So you've got the constraint of those harmonies to make sure that it's listenable. Now, they came out with new music, Philip Glass back in the day, and really celebrated as this avant-garde musician. And I still, to this day, make the argument that he's just a sound effects guy. To me, music has to have a form to it, a melody to it. It's got to have some reason. When you get a bunch of ping pong balls and you throw it in a grand piano and you take some malice and you hit them around and they go dong, 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 and then you play a C chord on the piano and you call that a song, I go, no, that's a sound effect. So to me, I think the more constraints you have, typically the better any sort of creative thing you are producing is going to be.
So let's put that back into the frame of the brain waves that we've been talking about, because one of the questions I often get, or the confusion that arises, is that people think that you need to be in a theta brainwave creative state all the time, or you need to be in beta all the time. And you don't. You actually move back and forth between these different states. And as you were describing the creative process for music, I'm like, okay, so sometimes you're hyper creative. You hear the melody. That's a new melody. It's brand new. That's full on theta brainwave state. Then you're like, okay, cool. I've got to have some rules around this to constrain myself to what I'm doing. I'm writing in the key of C. And then you're in beta mode, which is putting all of the pieces together. And then you would go back into creativity to build this flow. So I think that in some cases we move back and forth between all of these different states. The challenge that I have right now for everyone listening is that I believe we've spent far too much of our time only in beta, only in stress, only in anxiety, only in fear, only in nervousness, only in tension for the last 5 years. And the state of the world being what it is, when you hear news from the Middle East, it's not going to make you feel relaxed. So we really need to protect our attention right now, give ourselves a lot of grace, pat ourselves on the back, get into solitude so that we can be creative. I don't mean be lonely. That's solitude without a choice. Solitude is positive. Solitude is you're choosing to get into a place where you can be creative with no disruptions and no interruptions, and allow ourselves to flow back and forth between these various different states to be able to produce the work of our lives. And I think that's really one of the things that we're having trouble doing, which is why people are feeling so much psychological pain, is we have so much potential unrealized because we're so stressed all the time. Let's bring it down a notch, put up a few guardrails, and create some really cool pieces of whatever it is that you're doing: food, music, drama, whatever is magic for you.
Yeah. Well, I come from a large family. There's 7 of us kids, and we're blessed with fantastic parents who have and are living long lives. Our father lived till 91, but he passed away from Alzheimer's. And he was diagnosed at 85, and the next 6 years weren't very pretty, but you got through it. And there's dementia on his side of the family. His mother passed away from it. His sister probably passed away from it. Now, on the other side, my mom's side, she is going to turn 100 on April 5th, and her brain is brilliant. We were just up there over the holidays, and she's beating us at cards. She still lives in the same 12-acre home that we all grew up in. We do have full-time care for her there, just for her to walk around, have the peace of mind, when she's taking a shower. If she were to fall, there's someone there to look after her, and she gets a lot of folks, a lot of our family, a lot of friends are, constantly visiting. So she's brilliant. She's marvelous. But it's on my mind. I've got a 50-50 shot at this. Am I going to be my mom? Could I end up being my dad? And so brain health is really, really important to me. And I mentioned earlier, and I'd like to get your take on this, like creatine. I've been taking that, and I feel like I notice a difference. MCT oil, bullet coffee, which is MCT oil, and grass-fed butter. What is your take on that?
My take on optimizing brain health is that the basics always win. And I also come from a family where half the family has very strong neurodegenerative, Alzheimer's, dementia issues in that side of the family. The other side has cancer, so I'm toast either way. In general, whatever you do, cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, neurodegenerative diseases, I think the genesis of them is all the same. And we, of course, have our genetics. You cannot change that. What you can change is the expression of your genes and your lifestyle. So I'm always of the mind that it's probably about 40% genetics, 60% modifiable lifestyle. And it is very clear what the modifiable factors are when it comes to being healthy for a long period of time. The foundation of everything is sleep, 7 to 8 hours. Sleep consistently, sleep as well as you possibly can, defend your last hour, sleep in a dark room, and be consistent. That's always the foundation. Then, of course, nutrition. We want to be eating the rainbow, as many different colors of fruits and vegetables as often as you can, eating as organic as you can afford, grass-fed meat, grass-fed dairy, wild fish, as wild as you can when it comes to meat as well. Very few processed food products. Keep your sugar levels low. the basics. This is nothing complicated. If you want to do bullet coffee or MCT oils, that's totally fine. I'm a big fan of coconut and olive oil and avocado and nuts and hemp hearts and chia seeds. All of the healthy fats are absolutely incredible for us, especially for our brain tissue, because they're full of omega-3 fatty acids, which are used to make myelin, which wraps around the branches of the neurons in your brain and protects them from damage, just like bark on the branch of a tree. Then once you move on from nutrition, we think about exercise. We know that exercise does incredible things for the body and the brain. We know it doesn't need to be that intense, and it doesn't need to be done for very long. So walking is amazing. Run, jog, swim, fantastic. One of the things that's come up recently, though, is that intense exercise that produces lactic acid, which is what makes your muscles burn and you to hyperventilate a little bit while you're exercising, that lactic acid makes its way to the brain and stimulates brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates the growth of new neurons inside the brain. So those interval training sets or running up the hill or lifting a little bit of weight seems to have a specific beneficial effect upon the brain. And then the final piece of the puzzle is doing the little tiny practices that improve your brain, specifically like meditation or reading or music. Simply put, all of these things come down to sleep, nutrition, exercise, mindset. There's all sorts of little hacks that will take each of those up. But if you have a foundation that's established in those areas, then all of the other things will work. But if those areas are not being done super well, you can take all the supplements that you want. It's not going to help you. So do the basics really, really well. Like you just talked about your mom, right? She's 100. She's been living on the same plot of land. I'm sure she's exercising every day. She's in nature every day. She's eating good food every single day. As a result, she's having a great life. So
she's absolutely worn out the carpet as she makes her 15 laps with her walker and her nurse by her side, from the family room through the entryway, through the living room, through the dining room, through the kitchen and back again. And she does it every single day, whether she wants to do it or not.
Yeah. And that's actually a really interesting thing. She does it every single day, whether she wants to do it or not. That's the power of consistency. This summer I was swimming a lot, but my daughter was swimming a lot. And we went to the pool together and she's training. She wants to go to the Olympics. So like every day she's going, but I went with her and I know that she's going, so I can't not go. And there was a few mornings this summer, I did not want to go to the pool. I'm going to the pool my whole life. I'm like a little bit bored of it. But I went because she was there. Lo and behold, over the course of the entire summer, my VO2 max, I'm tracking it on my wearable device, just kept on going up and up and up and up and up. When we are consistent, we win. Micro wins consistently over time far outstrip these weekend warrior tactics that I used to do when I was a little bit younger. So I love the idea of consistency. I love the idea of micro wins. I love the idea of doing these healthy practices, whether you want to do it or not. So build the routines, surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing, create the communities, create the systems that make success inevitable. And that, I think, gives us our best chance at a long life, and also a long life where we're not sick. Health span and lifespan together.
And Michelle and I will do yoga 30 minutes in the morning. Yoga by Cassandra. She, as nice. I think they're up out of Toronto, where you are.
Yeah.
Totally free. It's on YouTube, and we've been doing yoga with Cassandra for probably 7 years. And sometimes, some weeks, like, we're on it, and we get, 5 30-minute sessions in. Other weeks, we get 2. We try to get a minimum of 3, if not 4, and then when we're really feeling good about ourselves, we get 5 in there. Should we be doing it every single day, or is it okay to go to 3 to 4 to 5?
So the research on physical health and well-being shows that we need around 20 to 30 minutes a day of anything. Mild to moderate is good. A little bit of intense is fine. So, 20, 30 minutes a day is great. If you can get to an hour, that's incredible. That's where you get like 98% of the benefits, but you'll get 80% of the benefits at 30 minutes. And then it sort of declines after that. From a mental health perspective, it's pretty clear that we need 3 to 5 sessions a week for about 45 minutes each to have the lowest risk for depression and anxiety. So if you want to have good mental health, 3, 4, 5 sessions a week is great, somewhere up to around 45 minutes, and the intensity does not matter. Anything works. Gardening, housework, walking, spin class, weights, yoga, fantastic. And then in terms of, is it cardio or weights or yoga, They're all different. They all have benefits. They're all phenomenal for you. So do what you love, because then you'll end up doing more of it.
Mm-hmm.
But cardio improves your cardiovascular system. Weight improves your muscles and your bones. Yoga improves your mobility, flexibility, and mindset and nervous system. So I love to mix them together. And so I'm a big fan of the 3x3 matrix, a few cardio sessions, a few strength type sessions, which is like lifting weights, yoga, or gardening or housework or some of that. And then a few stretching sessions, which is, of course, yoga and anything that increases your mobility. That also includes massage, right? Any sort of tissue work that you want to do. So a few cardio, a little bit of strength and speed, a little bit of stretching, and you win.
Well, man, we have covered a lot. If I boil it down to my top 3 things, and correct me if I'm wrong here, what I heard is, number 1, you got to sleep. You just got to figure out how you're going to get that sleep, because that's the foundation for everything else. Number 2, of course, I'm going to even throw out eat right, because that's a given. Number 2, then, in this case, is slow down and speed up. Find time in your busy day to just chill and do nothing and let your brain just think. And then, of course, 3 is some sort of physical exercise. You don't have to be training for the Olympics. You can be training for becoming 64.
That's right.
And hit the walk, golf, whatever it is that you like to do, but make sure that you love doing it so you keep doing it, right?
Younger next year. That's the goal.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You've got this new book out, Powerhouse. And I know you're working on another book. Can you tell our listeners real quick about what's in Powerhouse for them and where they can find it?
Powerhouse is all about mitochondrial health. Mitochondria are those little tiny structures inside all of your cells that create energy, and they're fundamental to preventing disease. They're fundamental to you having the energy to think and move. And when your mitochondria are healthy, your life will be awesome. So it's a whole book just about mitochondrial health, super practical, super straightforward, grounded in science. So if you want to check it out, it's called Powerhouse, and you can find it at my website, which is drgregwells.com, or on Amazon and all the other usual places. But I would be honored if anyone wanted to check that out.
Well, thank you, Greg. This has been an honor for me. After hearing you in Austin, Texas a few weeks ago at the census, I thought, man, here's a great show right here. How can we promote our own brain health so that we are our best storytelling selves? And I just really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your stories with us and share your experience and giving us good tips on what to do next.
Yeah, Parker, it was such an honor, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I love these conversations. The fact that this is our work is hilarious to me because I love it so much. And hopefully we can do it again.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening and sharing this episode with anybody you know who would benefit by creating and maintaining a healthy brain. And I mean, who couldn't, right? Duh. And hey, if you want to check out our Story Cycle Genie, go over to businessofstory.com/storycycle-genie. That's one word, storycycle-genie, to learn how it will remove months of painstaking brand story strategy development down to just minutes, simply, intuitively, fast, so that you can turn that minutia into immediate momentum and start crafting and sharing your brand stories with the world. Over at businessofstory.com/storycycle-genie. And I hope you join me next Monday when you will learn about the layered cake approach to creating a sweet brand story with none other than Allison Capaldi. And until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.